But unfortunately, most of that is being sucked out of the rural economy and in the independent producers in the small towns and going to some multinational corporation. Now, I don't wish that upon them. I know corporations have to make money. I'm sure not against that. But if they're making $1,500 a head and we're losing $300 a head, that's not sustainable. And so I think that conversation has to start where, again, if there's competition, if there's competition bidding on them cattle, if there's competition marketing that beef, I think that's a good place to start. And if consumers are able to use their voice, I think that would happen. So if we could sit down with them, we can't, hey, you get a fourth and we get a fourth and they get a fourth. I mean, I don't think we live in that sort of a utopia. I think that has to be done through competition. And if we allow those people with the power to take more profits, they're going to do that. And why shouldn't they?
Right, right. Maybe switching it up a bit from kind of the supply chain, just as we talk through things. One of the questions that I guess Tiffany had kind of laid out here was just, be interesting to hear from everyone here is like, if we look back over the last 5 or 10 years and then maybe look forward the next 5 or 10 years as it relates to maybe your particular commodity or your position in the industry, if you will, what have you seen as the biggest changes? And then what do you see as the biggest changes going forward? And are there, I mean, obviously there's challenges, and what are the opportunities in, within some of those changes? And anybody that wants to jump in, just go right ahead. And if there's other things that you want to talk about that I'm maybe not bringing up, please do so.
I learned one thing is my 15 years as a teacher. If you don't call on them, they're not going to say anything.
Well, I was trying to be nice, but okay, you're up then, James.
No, I'll volunteer.
Okay.
I think that's a great question. These industries are always changing. I mean, if you look back at the history of whatever business, you look back at, the Fortune 500 companies from 75 years ago, a fraction of them are still in existence today. And those are the ones that couldn't change, that couldn't adapt. Adaptability is everything. So I don't know what that looks like. I don't think anybody really knows what that looks like for any industry, but I think that there are innovators, there's technology. Again, when you see profit in an industry, they put that back into that industry. They develop new technologies, they develop new ways to do things. And I think that's great. That's great for consumers. That's where competition comes in, because that's where entrepreneurs come in. And I think that's a wonderful thing. What that's going to look like in our industry, I don't really know. There's a lot of segments, there's a lot of independent people, and that makes that really hard. But at the same time, I think that creates a good product too, because there's a lot of competition amongst, from the ground level, from artificially inseminating cows or picking out them genetics. We're trying to do that so that we can make the best calves possible and on down the line.
Thank you. Judge, you're up.
Yes, I'm the last 5 years. Well, what I don't know if I can capture much that hasn't been captured, but I would say the producers today have lots of resources, and I'm going to focus on the grass guys. There's lots of and prairie grass, not happy grass. There's lots of resources they can use to help them manage better, do things, get the little tweaks. And I mean, there's a support mechanism out there, probably more than I've seen before. I mean, in all aspects. I mean, from their banker, that they've got, everybody seems to have if they wanted, a support team. And I think that's the positive going forward. The other thing they need to capture is maybe look beyond themselves, look at the 30,000 foot view and see maybe what else they can capture. That's all I got for right now, but I'm still pondering. This has been good. Thank you.
If more comes to the top, just jump right in. Heidi, I'm going to go to you.
So my topic is probably more than 5 years back and more than 5 years forward, and it's how people consume media. And we're not talking just social media, all the different channels. It's the timeliness of it. You used to have to get up in the morning and watch the news and maybe read the paper if you got the paper early enough to read it. And then you'd go down to the coffee shop or the elevator or whatever local joint had coffee and talk about what you read in the news. And it might have been something from 2 or 3 days ago. And now you get up and Twitter's got 16 notifications for you of what happened. And even if you're not on Twitter, your son or your daughter or the neighbor kid's going to tell you what was going on. So just how fast information travels and how much information that people see in a day, that is just, so even if you have the right message and you're talking about agriculture and South Dakota farmers are great and we want to do right by the environment, and it's how do you get it in front of the right audience at the right time with the right people so that they can connect with it and grasp onto it and hold on to it. So
That is just a great comment. We were just having a conversation about that in the last couple of days, just the speed and then the volume. And how we move, the media just moves from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. And it's just, impossible to keep up with. So yeah, so our challenge is how do we keep in front of people? And I think that's a great point. Thank you. Bonnie.
And can I jump in just a sec?
Absolutely.
Just on that, one point I'd like to make. I think that, whatever aspect of agriculture we have, we always talk about telling our story. And we're so good at doing that to each other and preaching to the choir. We have a story, whether it's a soybean farmer or a cow-calf producer. We have a story that resonates with people. We are telling the story of freedom, of wealth creation, of environmentalism, conservation, a romantic, idyllic, you go on and on and on about how awesome our story is. There's not very many other industries, if any, that can say that have that good of a story to get out there and tell. But yet we don't do a very good job of doing it. And so I completely agree with Heidi. How do we get out there, tell that story, and stay in front of people? That's a big challenge, but I think it's one that we're up to, that we can win, because nobody else has a story as good as we do to tell.
And I would agree with that. And I think the challenge for the folks that are tasked with, really trying to get those messages out there is, when you look at, Facebook and how quickly people scroll by something, if it doesn't just catch their attention that fast, how do we just be in people's face, if you will? Maybe that's not the right way to say it, so that we get the opportunity to tell that story. I think there are, we can always have more people out there telling it, but how do we actually get people to slow down and pay attention to it? That's going to be the challenge, right? Bonnie. I'm not even sure if I know where this one started, but I think looking back and then looking forward, if you would.
Well, looking back and looking forward, I think consumer education has, always been important for all of us to do, and surely has been for us, is to try to connect with that consumer and help them to understand all the things that we are talking about right here. Exports have been a challenge for us in the past and have come back some, but continue to be an effort going forward. Precision ag has certainly changed a lot over, the last years, and it continues to just change and develop here as we go forward. So that we've surely seen a lot, and we'll see a lot more, I'm sure. Yields have been another thing that has just increased a lot over time, and I guess prices and so on. So those are, I guess, just a few things that I have. And so if anybody has anything else to add to that, that would be just fine.
You bet. And Glenn, I don't want to leave you out. I want to hear what your thoughts are. Thank you.
Well, I guess one of the things that I would circle back and come back to you on, Casey, is one of the things that has really changed, and I think in all of our industries, is the capital investment involved. And we talk about transitioning the farms to the next generation, but how are we going to get new folks? That's part of this conversation too. How are we going to get the next generation involved? And in our industry, we have opportunities for contractual agreements where you can shift some of that risk. But what do you see from the financial aspect? Where is this going to go down the road? And I'd like to hear your perspective on that side.
You bet. And you know, Glenn, that's something that we talk about, you know, frequently when we look at age of our producers. And so we look at our clients, we look at, you know, you open the door for me, so be careful what you wish for. You know, you look at, you know, ag land values at all-time highs across the state. I don't care where you go. And so you look at, you know, we do have nice resources with, you know, Farm Service Agency to help beginning farmers come in with both direct and the guaranteed programs that banks utilize. But just like you said, just the amount of capital it takes. You know, so when I started my career, I was at a little branch for First National Bank in Murdo and Midland. And I remember just scratching, trying to figure out how to make it work for guys to buy $200 an acre crop ground. We have a sale in Sully and Hughes County last week. The Sully County ground averages over $5,500 an acre, and the Hughes County farmland over $4,500 an acre. And just the sheer amount of money that it takes for, you know, to get those folks in business is incredible. You know, right now in agriculture, you know, it simply takes partnering with the previous generation somehow to get these folks involved in agriculture. You know, there's some one-offs that maybe work and folks that have, you know, strong off-farm income, but then they're having to work two jobs to try and, you know, make this work. And it seems that, you know, when I started my career, somebody that worked hard and was fairly conservative would succeed. Now, you better work hard, you better be conservative, and that in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to make it. So I think, you know, there's been some things through the Department of Agriculture that in a higher interest rate environment, I think were really helpful with, like the bond program that they had, you know, the ability to, you know, for a seller on a contract for deed to have interest income that was tax exempt and be able to pass on some lower rates to that younger producer. But the amount of wealth and of course, you know, where we're going to land on our, you know, stepped up basis and some of the capital gains issue, I mean, is going to have just a huge impact, which I'm preaching to the choir here, on the ability to pass these farms and ranches on. You know, I do think, and obviously that's the industry that I'm in on a daily basis. I think that you know, the lenders are up for that challenge. That's how we make money, is figuring out a way to lend it. But it becomes more and more challenging when you start talking about, you know, look at what input costs are going to do for 2022, and the squeeze that we're going to have on margins and just the sheer dollars that it will take to finance someone to, you know, farm 1,500 acres of crop ground, or a quarter of crop ground for that matter. And, you know, I think that we're going to just continue to need, you know, good dialogue out there. I think of a, you know, like Heidi's group there. I think that some of our industry groups, and I think they do a pretty good job of it, are going to have to continue to talk about and offer opportunities for people to learn about tools that are available to pass the farm down from generation to generation. And that's going to be a key. I don't know if that somewhat answers some of your question or not, Glenn.